Hello and welcome to this week's edition of SciChat. You'll be listening to this, hopefully, if you're listening to it the day that it is released on the Facebook page. You'll be listening to this on Monday, November 18th, which is a special day for me. As you may or may not know, for friends on Facebook, this is my birthday, in fact. Happy my birthday, everybody. But this week's topic, more importantly than my birthday, is email marketing. A really interesting topic for me to talk about, and we're going to get into a whole bunch of data about email marketing. But I just wanted to kind of reiterate, since we're moving to the new format, the way that this whole thing works is that basically every week on Monday morning essentially, we're going to be releasing a new YouTube video, about 30 minutes-ish, of data to our Facebook group. The group is SciChat, of course, which is where you are right now, probably. And then we're going to release the video to the group. We'll have a little discussion in a thread there. And then throughout the week, we'll be posting other pieces of content, other kinds of information about that topic, and we'll be having discussions there. Now, if you want to discuss something other than email marketing, of course, you're more than welcome to. We have a great community closing in on 600 members, which is super awesome, given that we only started this a couple weeks ago. We have a great community of folks who are really, really smart, really, really interested in marketing with data, marketing with a sort of scientific point of view. And so you should definitely take advantage of that and communicate with them and have great conversations with them. That way, we'll all kind of get the most out of the community. And I've said this before, sometimes I sound like a broken record about this, but really my favorite thing about SciChat isn't necessarily just that I get to talk for 30 minutes. My favorite thing about SciChat is that the community, we've managed to find a group of folks, a fairly sizable group of folks, who are super smart, super good at marketing, but beyond that, more importantly than just that, because there's a lot of places where you can find super smart marketers on the internet, we're all interested in marketing with a data background. Right? We're all interested in applying the scientific methods, using things like data, facts, and experimentation to make our marketing better. And so definitely jump on the Facebook group if you're not already there, or if you're already there and you're not commenting and asking questions and answering questions, please go do that. It is a great time, great group of folks. Now, every week, I typically, every time I speak, really, every PowerPoint deck that I make includes some unicorns, typically at the beginning, because then I'm going to tell you that I call myself a social media scientist, but I do so because I go to a lot of marketing conferences, read a lot of marketing books and blogs, and hear a lot of advice in social media circles specifically, but in marketing circles in general. That is, well, for lack of a better word, it's unicorns and rainbows advice, right? Stuff like engage in the conversation. Be awesome, right? The most useless piece of advice I've ever heard, because who's not trying to be awesome? But as a social media scientist, as a marketing scientist, somebody interested in applying the scientific method to marketing, I am interested in going beyond those unicorns and rainbows, superstitions, and myths to get to the actual data, facts, science behind the way people behave online and how we as marketers can leverage those behaviors. In light of that philosophy, this week, like I said, is about email marketing. And I think the interesting thing about email marketing in this context is that it is a contradiction of sorts. Right, the typical email marketer, the person who's really good at email marketing, and I know several folks like that, but the person who's traditionally into email marketing is a walking contradiction, right? And I say that with love because really everybody is, but about marketing, email marketing folks are, and what I mean by that is that they are very quant focused. They're very results driven, numbers oriented, and they're typically all about, if they're good at what they do, all about testing and experimentation. Right? It's so easy to do split testing in email. It's so easy to count opens, clicks, forwards, and even the best metrics of all, ROI, bottom line. It's really easy to track all these things. Email marketers have been doing this for, more than a decade now, really, right? And so it's really easy to apply the scientific method and data that we also love to email marketing. And so in the email marketing circles, you find, especially with professionals who are really good at it, you find a lot of folks who are, pretty nerdy, people who are pretty good at Excel, know what a pivot table is, right? And they tend to do a lot of testing, the conversion rates, click-through rates, and ROI tends to be of email marketing tends to be higher than it is for a lot of other online channels. Both that is because both of the factors that it's a great channel for direct response, even if there was no testing. But then additionally, because so many people are doing testing and learning how to do it better, it's just so easy to iterate on email marketing. Now, that's wonderful, and that would lead you to believe that is really great format for a scientific marketer. But the contradiction part comes in that in the midst of all this great quant focus, all this great interest in numbers and interest in experimentation and interest in science, you have some really strongly held superstitions. And I think myth isn't the right word in this context. I think superstition is really the key word here, right? Because a superstition doesn't mean that you've never seen it be true. Okay, and myth generally is a myth. A unicorn's a myth, right? Because you've never seen a unicorn, but some people believe that they're real. Actually, most people don't, but you get the point. Superstition, however, is it reminds me, and the behavior here reminds me of an experiment done by the behavioral psychologist B.F. Skinner. Behavioral psychology, father of behavioral psychology, really. And one of the experiments he did a lot of stuff with pigeons, with birds. And one thing he did is that he would, pigeons they dance, they do these weird movements, right? And so what he would do is he would have a pigeon in a cage, essentially, and I might be butchering the actual experiment a little bit, but he'd have a pigeon in a cage and have a chute attached to the cage, and out would come a pellet of food. And the experimenter would push the button that shoots the pellet of food at the pigeon, basically randomly, right? The pigeon would do something, do a movement, do 2 steps, a little shuffle, whatever, and a pellet of food would come out, right? Then, throughout the course of the experiment, days, weeks, whatever, the experimenter would push the button randomly, based on random things the pigeon is doing, or not doing, or just at random time intervals, right? And the pigeons believed that their actions were correlated with the pellet coming out of the food chute, right? They were causative, right? And so the pigeons developed these really complex dance sequences, essentially. Well, they would do all these crazy moves, expecting that that's what produced the drop of food in the first place. Right? And this is the kind of thing you see in email marketing, unfortunately, with email marketing superstitions, right? You'll see, don't email on the weekends. That's one. It's almost unspoken in a lot of cases, and I hope that some of my work has begun to change that a little bit. But a lot of folks don't email on weekends because less people are at the office, or maybe they emailed once on the weekend and it didn't work. Or a lot of folks are really afraid of. There's a superstition against emailing their lists too much, and usually that comes mostly from just people saying that that's the right thing to do, right? People say, "Oh, don't email your list too much; you'll burn them out." I have not actually seen any data that shows this mythical burnout of a list. In fact, all my data seems to indicate that emailing email lists more frequently is better, and we'll get to that data in a little bit. But that's why I say that there's so many that email marketing and email marketers can be walking contradictions sometimes, because they are so quant focused in most areas of what they do. They do so much testing, so much experimentation, but then on certain things they're just unwilling to budge, right? Like this idea that we'll get through some of the data. Enough with the hypothetical examples. Let's just jump into the data, because, like I said, I have a bunch of data. I don't want to spend too much time on the preamble this week. So, if you weren't already convinced about the importance of email marketing, it's statistics like this one that should begin to convince you. What I did is I did a survey and I asked people, how often do you buy products or services from email messages you receive? Now, about between 50 and 60% said fewer than once a month, and then between 20 and 30% say never. But you see the numbers for once a month, more than once a month, and more than once a week. The key to remember here is that surveys are tough sometimes. I use them, but generally as sort of direction finders. This kind of data you always have to take with a grain of salt when it comes to survey data. And the reason is people, twofold in this case, people don't know what they do. Right? Nobody actually knows, in survey format at least, what they do and why they do it. Like, people are really, really bad at reporting that. And then the other thing is that people report things that either they think you want to hear as the survey to asker, essentially, or that they want to be true about themselves as the respondent. And so surveys about marketing tactics are exceptionally bad about this because people say things that they want to be true, not that actually are true. If you ask the average person, does advertising, how much does advertising affect you, right? As far as your purchasing decisions, people are going to way underreport how much it affects them. Right? If you ask people, are you more likely to follow a Twitter account of a major brand if it responds to you? People are going to way over-report that. But the reality of the situation is, if you look at most of the top accounts, a lot of them don't do a whole lot of replying. And in fact, Twitter developed a feature that allows you to hide replies from your timeline, which is the thing that people look at when they decide whether or not to follow you. Right? And so surveys are tough, and so with a survey like this, I actually am heartened by this, because if you add up the more than once a week, which is a couple percent, and then the 5% more than once a month, and almost 10%, you're starting looking at close to 20% of people who admit to essentially buying from email messages once a month or more, right? Close to 20%, maybe 16, 17, 18%. And then never, fewer than once a month is not never, right? And that's more than half. So again, email is a powerful channel. Just be careful with asking people what you should do, right? Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't get feedback. Is that you should get what I like to call observational feedback, right? Send email messages and see if people buy stuff. Don't ask them if they're going to buy from your email. Is the better way to do it. But here, I ask, how much of your email do you read? And again, with this one, people want to say all of it. But most people don't say all of it. They say most of it, not all of it, in fact, which is that top bar says most of it, and the bar all the way to the left says all of it. And then a lot of people say about half, and a good percentage say very little of it. Imagine reading so little of your email that you actually report on an email survey that you read very little of your email. So people don't read a ton of their email. And then here's where the stats start to get, I think, interesting, is that, when you ask people, do you read your email on a mobile device? Now, this is not how much of your email do you read on a mobile device. This is not a measure of how much mobile reading happens. This is just how many people use a mobile device sometimes to read their email. 81% in my survey. That number's only gone up, and it's only going to go up in the future. So we're starting to piece together this idea that people don't want to necessarily admit that email marketing works, but it does, and we all know it does. And they get a ton of email that they don't necessarily read, and they're reading a lot of times, a lot of people are reading on their mobile device. And then, you start to think about something like this, where if you ask people if they use a separate work and personal inbox, only 12% of people use separate work and personal inboxes. Let that sink in for a second, right? Because it leads into the general thing that I was just building, but there's a very specific point alongside this. Only 12% of people, okay? That means that about 88% of people 88% of people do not use separate work and personal inboxes. So think about that. If you're a B2B marketer and you're doing email marketing and you find yourself ever asking, how does B2B different from B2C in this context, remember this graph, right? If you ever are concerned as a B2B marketer about emailing outside of work hours, remember this graph. Right? If you're ever concerned that you're being too lighthearted, you're not being serious enough, remember this graph. 88% of people get their work inbox, have their work inbox and their personal inbox in the same place. Professional emails and emails from their grandmother go to the same inbox. So that means, B2C and B2B, and especially in email, is not as different as you would think it is. Right? So don't be afraid, if you're one or the other, to borrow from the other one. Right? But then, like I said, there's a general theme. So remember, we said, don't like to admit that email marketing works, but it does. They get a lot of emails they don't read. A lot of times they're reading it on their mobile devices, and there's only one inbox, okay? And now look at this. 58% of people, however, report using a separate junk inbox. Okay? That's far more people. In fact, most people use a separate junk inbox. Uses like a Hotmail account, Yahoo account, sometimes Gmail account, whatever. Just an email you give to somebody when you don't want to get what they're going to send you, right? You use it to like log into some account when you know they're just going to send you nonsense you're not actually going to want to read. So again, just to reiterate, people don't want to admit that it works. They get a lot of it they don't read. They're reading it on their mobile device when they're out and about in the real world. Your commercial emails are showing up on their mobile device while they're out and about in the real world alongside emails from their grandmother. And a lot of people won't even give you their real email address. They're going to give you their junk email address. So what this means, what this graph, these series of graphs tell us, email marketing works. It's important to do. And if I had a choice between a Twitter follower and an email subscriber, I would go with an email subscriber every time. But we have to rethink the way we're doing email. Email is changing. People are reading it on mobile devices. So get the thing with mobile devices is get your mobile formatting down. That's table stakes. That's just to play the game. Your email's got to look okay on mobile, right? If it doesn't look okay on mobile, stop everything you're doing, fix that, okay, before we even continue. But beyond that, how is your email going to compete with the real world? If I'm at dinner and my wife goes to the bathroom for a second, I whip out my phone because I'm not allowed to use the phone when we have cloth napkins at the table. That's the rule. And I whip out my phone and I'm flipping through emails and I've only got a couple of minutes. How is your email going to compete with that, right? And then I only have one inbox. My buddies might be emailing me, right? I might be getting pictures from my trainer about lifting huge heavy weights or whatever. How is your business email going to compete with that? I may not have even given you. How do you even make sure you get my real email address? You don't get the junk email address, right? So this means we have to rethink email marketing. And through data, I think I've uncovered a few ways that we can start to do that. And it's important that we think of things. The reasons why this data is true. Don't just take the data as law, as set in stone, carved in a stone law, but think of the reasons behind these behaviors and why these things work. Don't just do these things. For instance, emails with an ampersand in the subject line have a higher click-through rate than emails that don't have an ampersand in the click-through rate in the subject line. That does not mean that ampersands are a magical character that leads to more click-through rates. What it means is the behavior that leads you as an email marketer to include the ampersand in the subject line, the behavior that causes you to think that you don't have 3 characters to spend, you can only use 1, you can only spare 1, you got to save those 2 extra characters, is the behavior that leads to more click-through rates. And what is that behavior? Packing a ton of value into your emails, right? If you've got to use an ampersand, that means you're trying to jam so much awesome stuff into your emails that it's obvious that your emails are super awesome, generally speaking. So again, ampersands are not magical bullets. They're not magical characters. What they are is they're indicators of behavior that works. And that behavior is wanting to pack a lot of interesting content into emails, right? Making good emails, essentially, because they're packed full of valuable information. When we look at first name personalization, we see that it works, meaning emails that have my first name as the receiver, in the subject line tend to have a higher click-through rate than emails that do not have my first name in the subject line. And that just makes sense, right? My brain is really good at filtering and saying it has nothing to do with me, nothing to do with me. And one of the things that tells me that something has something to do with me is the fact that my first name is in it. You say, Dan, I'm just programmed to respond to that. Right? If you call me what my wife and mother call me, which is actually a variation of my name, you're much more likely to get a response too, because very few people call me that one, and I'm not even going to tell you. You can figure it out. It's the diminutive version of my name, but right. If you manage to somehow do that, don't. Oh, okay, but okay. Let me be careful here. I'm not telling you to, write some program that looks at people named Dan and people named Robert and calls him Bobby, right? But do use first name personalization and experiment with it, because if you take it a step further, I've gotten pretty hip to the fact that companies use first name personalization, right? I get that. I see the word Dan, especially with a little bit of weird formatting around it, like a space where it shouldn't be. I'm hip to the fact of what you're doing. I know what you're doing. I know it's an automated system. But and if I ignore it, not a big deal. But if you're using my company name, you say HubSpot, then I might not be so. I'm still pretty hip to what you're doing, but if I'm going to feel bad if I ignore it, right? Because it feels like I'm not doing something for my company. If I just ignore an email that's got my first name in it, that's one thing. But if I ignore an email that's got my company name in it, I'm not doing something. I'm doing something wrong, right? I'm not doing something I should be doing, potentially. So experiment with personalization in all cases that you can, right? And personalization there's easy ways to do it like this, right? Where you just take what you know about me and stick it in obvious places in the email, okay? There are other kinds of personalization. We'll get to them in a little bit. When we look at the number of links in an email, essentially there's a slight increase. Basically, the more links you put in, there's a slightly positive effect on the amount of clicks that you're going to get from that email. Makes sense. Just more places to click. right? And additionally, if there's a ton of links in an email, hopefully there's a ton of links in the email because there's a ton of information in the email. There's a ton of things for me to click on that are awesome because you're doing that ampersand behavior. And then if you look at unsubscription rate, as the number of links in an email goes up, unsubscription rate goes down. Why is that? Well, it's the easy reason is that because it's so much harder to find a unsubscription link in the midst of 100 different other links. But I think the more important reason is that ampersand behavior. You're including so many links, why would I unsubscribe? If you're giving me 30 different things of value in one email, why in the world would I unsubscribe? And the chances are, the first email you send me, I don't actually want this, unsubscribe. So if you're sending me that a couple of times in, I love it. I'm not going to unsubscribe if you're packing other stuff. This is the other way to personalize. Pack in a lot of content, right? But then try to make sure that content is relevant to me, right? Because you likely have an audience that is full of people who have different sorts of interests. So what you need to do is you need to segment those people into different groups, different lists, if you will, and send them different emails based on what they're interested in. And so when you look at companies that use one list, that's the black bar there, they tend to have a lower click-through rate, average click-through rate for their emails than companies that use 2 to 6 lists, use more lists. Because what these companies are doing is they're breaking down their email list. They're not just blasting the one big email list and sending them one big, random, generalized chunk of content. They're trying to send and treat their lists differently. That's called marketing automation, really. That's where you start to get to the tip of the marketing automation iceberg, meaning automating marketing, using the power of a computer, using the power of an automated system where that is better at being quote-unquote human or better at being personalized and targeted and relevant than a normal human would be at scale, makes your emails better. You can do first name personalization. You can do company name personalization. You can do topic personalization when you start to segment. And you can do time personalization. So, if you look at the recency of a subscriber and you compare it to the click-through rate, i.e. the number of days that have passed between me signing up to your email list and the email you sent me, and then you compare that to the click-through rate, the newer the subscriber, the higher the click-through rate. Meaning, the closer the email that I get is in time to the action that led to me getting that email in the first place, the more likely I am to click on your email. Now that's because you are still top of mind to me. If I go to your website, I sign up for your email list, or I get an offer that signs me up to your email list, and then a couple of days later you emailed me, I remember who you are. I remember why I gave you my email. I remember that I gave you my email. And I probably still have the need, I probably still have the problem that I was hoping giving you my email would solve. Compare that with if I go to your website, I fill out a form that gives you my email. 2 years later, you email me. If my email is still the same, and I even get it, I've likely forgotten who you are. I've likely don't have any reason to want your content anymore. There's a more higher likelihood. So the thing is here, you need to use marketing automation systems to send email on your receiver's schedule, not your own schedule. And here's a similar stat when we talk about lead nurturing campaigns. So lead nurturing campaign is I take an action on your website, and if you know my email address, you kick off a series of emails that come to me. One might happen immediately after I take whatever action we're talking about here. One might come a day later, 3 days after that, 4 days after that, 5, whatever, right? You get the point. And so when you look at the number of days after the initial action that an email is sent in a lead nurturing campaign, and you compare that to the click-through rate, the fewer the number of days, the higher the click-through rate. The closer the email is that you're sending me in time to the action that I've taken that resulted in that email being sent to me, the higher the click-through rate. The more you're sending email on my schedule, not your schedule, right? You're not just sending me emails on Tuesday because that's the day that you blast your entire email list. You're sending me an email at 3 o'clock on a Saturday night because I happen to be up for some reason and can't sleep, and I decided to research some problem that I've been having, in my work life, and this company might have a solution for me, and I put my email address in, or I look at a specific page on your website. I'm a hot lead. Send me an email right then. Send me an email the next morning, right? You're sending email on my schedule, not your schedule necessarily, right? Because your broadcast day, your newsletter day on Tuesday means nothing to me, right? And then subscriber recency It is pretty interesting because, if you look at unsubscription rate, what you find here is that basically people unsubscribe in the first couple of days, and then they shake out right away, basically, and then unsubscription rate plummets. So, don't be afraid to send email right away, even though the unsubscription rate is high, just because that's just how it works. Some people are just going to unsubscribe. It just happens. Don't get over it. If you're taking actions on what is listed has been stable, otherwise you have a stable unsubscription rate. You experiment, you do something new, and the unsubscription rate spikes over the course of a couple of experiments. Then yeah, look at what you're doing, trying to figure out if that's what's causing it. But generally speaking, don't be afraid of people shaking out of your email list. If they unsubscribe right away, you don't really want them anyways. And then when we look at day of the week, emails sent on Saturdays and Sundays have a much higher click-through rate than emails sent during the week. There's a lot of reasons for this. Trust that it is based on a very, very large data set given to me by our friends at MailChimp. 1.5 billion email sends over several years, a very, very large data set. Click-through rates are higher on Saturdays and Sundays. They just are. I get so much less email on Saturdays and Sundays. I get so much email during the week, I barely read any of it, right? I use Gmail priority inbox, right? And I don't even read all of that. I'm inbox 10,000, 12,000, something like that. Some people try to get to inbox 0. I'm inbox 10,000. Maybe not everybody's like me, but based on that survey, a lot of people aren't reading all their email. And especially during the week. On the weekends, however, I get way less email. And what email I do get, I read, even if it has very little to do with me. And so experiment with send emails on Saturdays and Sundays. Now, don't only send email on Saturdays and Sundays, but experiment with it. And that's the thing. If you send email on Saturdays and Sundays, if you do an experiment and it performs better for you, send more email on Saturdays and Sundays. Don't be afraid just because somebody tells you the superstition that Saturdays and Sundays aren't good, right? But don't do it just because Dan Zarrell said so. Experiment because Dan Zarrell said so, but keep doing it because your data said so. That's the key at the end of the day. And then unsubscription rates, actually highest on Tuesday. Because there's a huge superstition in email marketers, at least ones who haven't been exposed to my data, that Tuesday is a great day to send email. Because you can't send it on Monday. Right? Everybody's too busy on Mondays. Everybody has that idea. Everybody sends them on Tuesdays. Every marketer. And so that's when I'm in my unsubscription mode. I'm like, yeah, you thought you were going to be sneaky, send me an email on Tuesdays? You're gone. Dunzo. Right? So, again, experiment with Saturday and Sundays. Don't be afraid to experiment with Tuesday, too. But just be aware that, generally speaking, if you're doing it on Tuesdays right now, that's when your broadcast day is, when your newsletter day is. Experiment with it. Switch it up a little bit. See how it works for you. Sending frequency. There is no huge drop-off as sending frequency increases. Right? So this is the number of sending frequency here, the bottom axis there, is the number of email sends to a list per month. So once you're out to 4 sends a month, like once your email list is being sent to once a week, if you go out to 30 times a month, there is no huge drop-off in click-through rate. Okay? And if you're about to do an experiment with this, because people ask me, Dan, how much email should I send? My answer is always the same. More. Because that gives you there's a whole bunch of reasons to do more email, not the least of which is the more email you send, the more chances you get to experiment with, the topics, with personalization, with segmentation, with, timing, all the kinds of, you can just experiment more if you send more email, so you're just going to get better at it. Also, sending more email is a likely outcome of sending on your subscribers' schedule. Right? Sending once a week is great. That's how you keep your frequencies low. But since there's really no penalty for sending more, click-through rates don't drop dramatically, and that means that you can do more things. So if I'm on your website and I view 5 pages in a week, send me a couple more emails. Right? Don't be afraid. There's no reason to. So it frees up a lot of your ability to do great email marketing, great personalization. Excuse me. But really the key with sending frequency, to understand that if you decide you're going to do some experimentation with email sending frequency, the thing you really have to understand is that, say you have an email click-through rate of 10%, and I'm just saying that for math's sake, just to make the math easy. If your normal click-through rate is 10% and you double your sending frequency, so say you go from 1 email a week to 2 emails a week, from 4 to a month to 8 a month essentially, and your email and your click-through rate goes to 7%, you're getting 14% total a week, right? So if you started at 10% and you double your email frequency, sending frequency, as long as you stay above 5%, you're still getting more raw clicks. right? So don't look at a slight decline in click-through rate if that happens, although there's no reason to believe that it will. But even if that does happen, you still have to understand that you're probably getting more total clicks, which is better in the long run. And then unsubscription rate and sending frequency. The more emails you send, the lower your unsubscription rate is. Right? Now, again, we have to remember that it's compound. So if you're sending twice more a month and you get double the or half the unsubscription rate, you're still getting the same number of unsubscribes. But I think the point is, if you only send me, like I said, if that in that example where I sign up for you run your website and then 2 years later you send me an email, I'd be like, whoa, 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 who are you? You sent me one email in 2 years. I don't even remember who you are. Unsubscribe. But if you're sending me a couple emails every week, heck, if you're sending me an email a day, if I don't like them, I'm going to unsubscribe in the first couple of days. If I'm going to shake out, which is not bad, you didn't want me to email us anyways, probably not interested. But if I am interested, and you're sending good email, sending it on my schedule, sending it targeted to my interests, packing it with a lot of content, a lot of interesting value, I'm going to be okay with it probably. And I know why you're emailing me. A week later, I'm not going to be surprised that you're emailing me because you've been emailing me ever since. So that's the end of the data this week. Thanks everybody for tuning into this week's SciChat. I am glad to see everybody in the Facebook group, so I hope to see you there, and I will be there over the course of the week, and say happy birthday to me. I'm actually recording this, of course, before my birthday, but I know that on Monday will be my birthday, which is when we're releasing the video, so say happy birthday to me. Let's say I'm 26 again. All right, that sounds about right. So thanks everybody, and I will we'll talk to you during the week, and I'll be back with another video in 1 week.